Bonsoir à tous et à toutes. Mon nom est Nadine
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nadine Duguay-Lumé, and I'm the CEO of Dialogue New Brunswick. I would like to welcome you here to this series of public dialogues on the local government elections and allow you to meet the candidates in the region, in the Dieppe region. These dialogues can be heard on Dialogue New Brunswick's Facebook page in French and in English, and also on the City of Dieppe's YouTube channel. Our dialogues this evening will be in French, but with simultaneous interpretation services, and the candidates can respond in the language of their choice. The dialogues will also be broadcast on Rogers TV French channel as follows. Tuesday, May 4th at noon, Wednesday, May 5th at 5 p.m., Thursday, May 6th at 5 p.m., Friday, May 7th at 1 p.m., and Saturday, May 8th at 4 p.m. They will be presented in 6-hour blocks. On the English channel, the schedule is as follows. Wednesday, May 5th at 1 p.m. and Friday, May 7th at 4 p.m. They will also be presented in 6-hour blocks. So thank you, Rogers. I'm pleased to host this dialogue this evening with Yannick Godin, a 12th grade student and president of the Student Council at Mathieu Martin School. Good evening, Yannick. Hi, Nadine. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the territory we are gathered on is the unceded and unsurrendered traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which were first signed by the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples with the British Crown in 1725. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but rather recognized the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy title and established the rules for an ongoing relationship between the nations. I am grateful that we can all gather virtually here this evening and thankful to the First Peoples who share their ancestral lands with all of us. Well, and it's really not easy to pronounce the names there, so good job. Also, we are on the Mi'kmaq unceded territory here, so we'll correct that at the next dialogue, but thank you, Yannick. So on behalf of Dialogue New Brunswick, I want to take this opportunity to emphasize our commitment to addressing systems of oppression that have led to deep inequalities and the denial of rights to self-determination. We are actively working to deepen our learning at the individual level, to provide learning opportunities on anti-racism and decolonization, and to develop partnerships with organizations serving and led by underrepresented groups. And I'll now turn it over to my co-host for the introduction of the candidates. Thank you, Nadine. It is my great pleasure to introduce the following candidates. For this first part this evening, Mr. René Ephestion from Dieppe. He's a Ward 4 councillor candidate. Corinne Godbout, councillor at large. And Paulin Blaise Ngweth from Dieppe as councillor Ward 2. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. But before we move on to the long-awaited question and answer period, I do have some information to share with you. These dialogues are not debates. They are opportunities for the Dieppe residents to get to know the candidates for the Municipal, Health Authority, and District Education Council elections. Did you know that all of that was a part of local government, Yannick? And that's important. Some people forget. My mother has gone to vote in the past and she didn't know that. So quite often people forget that about local government elections. So it's very important to have all of these people here this evening. And this is why we formed groups of candidates that are running for different positions, and we've mixed them up. We would also like to mention that we've extended an invitation to all candidates, and the people who are here with us this evening and those who will be here tomorrow as well are those who have accepted the invitation, and we'd like to thank you very much. As for today's proceedings, we will ask the same 8 questions to our candidates. The first 4 will be the same for everyone in all dialogues. The next 4 will be by theme, but chosen randomly during the dialogue in order to allow fairness. So that's where we're going to have fun. We're going to choose questions randomly. They will each have a maximum of 2 minutes to answer the questions. At the end of the question period, each candidate will be given 2 minutes and 30 seconds for their closing remarks. We will not be able to take questions from the public on Facebook because we simply don't have enough time. So Yannick, can you give me the instructions for what we're expecting this evening? Yes, of course, with pleasure. So please adhere to the following principles, which apply here in the same way as they do on our social media platforms. We encourage everyone to be respectful and courteous, especially when posting a comment on social media. We have a policy on our social media and encourage people to follow it, or comments will be deleted. In the room here, we recognize everyone's efforts to prepare for tonight. We recognize your courage and the different perspectives you will be bringing. I think it's time to get started on the question period. We're going to provide some clarification for the candidates and for those listening, and we will be repeating that clarification at the beginning of each dialogue. Some of the questions may be more relevant to one organization or another rather than the one you're running for. But what we're looking for in your response are opportunities for collaboration between the different bodies and to inform constituents about what each one is already doing or could be doing more of. We will adapt some of the questions for our district education councils and RHA candidates where applicable. Okay, let's go, Nadine. Great. Is everybody ready? All right. So the first question, it is on vision and strategic thinking. We all know that change is happening faster and faster. That's why we are seeing an emerging trend in the world where organizations are planning for the very short term, 6 months to 2 years. 2 years is almost considered long term. So how are we're going to look at the long term, though, the very long term would be 100 years. How do you see the future of region or the region of Dieppe in 100 years? What is your vision and what is the legacy you would like to leave for future generations? Madame Godbout, you have the floor. Oh, I have the privilege of answering first. Well, 100 years, that's a long time. So our urban planners, however, seem to think that 100 years is not very far away. And I've experienced that in the past. In urban planning, we have to look at the 100-year term. So for me, my vision of the city, there are 3 pillars I'm focusing on. First of all, the families. Families will continue to exist in 100 years in all different forms. I'd like to see a city where a family can continue to live and be happy. And so that is part of my vision for Dieppe in 100 years, to find families in different forms and families that are happy and feel safe. We also have to think of climate change. We have to make sure we have a city that is still offering the support and the infrastructure necessary for innovation, for entrepreneurship, to continue to be innovative in 100 years. And I think we have to continue to work towards that. We also want a city in which we have found the balance between growth and the respect for nature. Many of our challenges in the city in the future, we have to find our solutions in nature. So we have to protect it. We have to look after it. We live very hurriedly today in Dieppe, but we have to make sure we respect nature as we live. So my vision for Dieppe in 100 years is that balance. So the legacy I would like to leave is that in spite of this fast-paced growth, we hope that all future councils will continue to create a city where we can help each other to live a wonderful life and live happily here in the city of Dieppe. Thank you, Madame Godbout. I'm going to continue around. We'll change the order for each question, but right now, Paulin, you have the floor. And so thank you to everyone And thank you for the opportunity to be able to present my ideas here. Very quickly, I'd like to say that in 100 years, well, the Dieppe is growing very quickly. So for me, the first thing I'd like to see is a participatory democracy in 100 years, that it will continue, that democracy will continue, that it will be ongoing, to allow people to speak out, to have referendums. We want a city that is built well, and it'll need referendums to be able to allow people to work closer together. And the second thing I'd like to add, I'd like to see a city that is innovative in terms of the environment, because climate change, it exists and it's very important. Over time, it is really forcing people to think about the future. So if there's something I would like to leave to our children and theirs, is something in that sense. If we do nothing, we'll sink. So for many years, scientists have been telling us that if we don't do anything, the world is going to be flooded over and we won't be able to do anything. So by building our city here, we have to think of the future, and we have to think of climate change as a priority. That's my opinion as a future councillor. Thank you, Paulin. René, you have the floor to wrap up this question. Yes. Well, 100 years. If we had the possibility of doing everything, well, I think we need to use imagination, but I'm thinking of things that have already been pointed out, that we have to really start working towards the environment, protecting the environment, because we see what's going on in the world, even within municipalities. We have to find the way to have sustainable development. And there are things being done the world over. We have to be able to look elsewhere to get ideas to help us move forward. Now, we'd also like more social diversity. By that, I mean a greater mix, a social mix, by affordable housing, to allow different families to come and set up here in New-Brunswick. We talk about immigration to make up for the declining birth rate, but everybody needs affordable housing. Everybody who comes here doesn't necessarily have with financial means. So this social mix is important to allow all sorts of different people from different settings to live together. Another important point is to have the adequate infrastructure to allow our businesses, our future businesses, to develop and to provide us with the resources we need in Dieppe to allow us to reach sustainable developments and to have affordable housing and to have a greater number of families here in the city of Dieppe. So 100 years is far away, but at the same time, it's not. So we really have to work towards that. Thank you. Thank you. And now for our second question. In your opinion, how can the various levels of government, municipal and health authority, governments, how can they play a greater role in the education sector? How can your organization support the 10-year plan of the Department of Education and Early Childhood Education? Paulin, you have the floor. Well, I think that when we're talking about health, that is federal jurisdiction, and they have to work collaboratively with the province. But when we talk about health, and I know there's a question on mental health that's going to come up later, but it gets people really thinking. I think the city has a major role to play in that. It has to be able to inform its citizens in cooperation with the federal government and with the provincial government. And we know this. we can't refuse to work in the health field, but for me, in the education field, it's a priority for me. It's important to support them. It's the only way we have to become more involved in the city in terms of the health of our youth and the people around us. And very quickly, we saw it through COVID. I would have liked to see our city more invested, perhaps by handing out masks to the population and to our youth who probably needed them. So it's very important. Our health is very important, and health continually comes in the discussions and the debate. And as a city, we have a major role to play. Thank you. Corinne? Could you repeat the question, please? Yes. In your opinion, how can the various levels of government, the municipal and health authorities, how can they play a greater role in the education sector? And how can your organization support the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development's 10-year plan for education? Well, if you look at the 10-year plan, on the Francophone side, for people listening to us, it's really to give our child a head start. There's a whole series of objectives that are included in it, and it gives all sorts of possibilities for the future. We're talking about well-being, community, identity, supporting people in their development. So perhaps there are even too many solutions, too many recommendations. It's hard to consider them all. So the best thing I can do is give you an example. Recently, we at the Mathieu Martin School. Well, right now it's going to be celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2023, and they have a wonderful project that is an example of what we can do to give the students more potential to develop competencies and skills. This is a project that will have an indoor courtyard, a community garden, innovation center, and a technology, and that touches all sorts of issues that are important to us. As a municipal council, we can support that project financially, morally, giving them as resources to support the people who had to work to develop this, people who had the vision. We have to support them. As a city council, we can support that type of project that will develop our youth and work in partnership with them. Thank you, Corinne. René, you have the floor. Well, I lived in a completely different municipal system up to the age of 35 in France. And in France, municipalities are much more involved. More concretely, the municipalities, well, from grade 1 to grade 5, the schools belong to the municipalities, so that they participate in the work being done, in the maintenance, in the building, in the restoration. They participate in after-school activities as well. And so where I grew up, the municipality actually manages education. These schools come under their purview. So when I look at the system here, what Dieppe and other municipalities do, there's very little involvement. There is very specific support, but what I'd like to see over the next 10 years, well, I think there are sectors in where we can act directly. For example, on the well-being. The well-being, well, Dieppe is well placed to work with the schools because we have trails, and in the 10-year plan, we talk about physical activity. In Dieppe, we have that infrastructure to allow that. One point that is important to me is healthy eating. We have the highest rate of obesity here in North America. And what concerns me is, and in the schools, we learn math, we learn reading and writing, but we don't learn how to eat. And so the municipality could cooperate with these school districts in order to develop that part of education in our youth, a healthy eating. Thank you, René. René, could we just adjust your microphone somewhat? It's very difficult to hear you. And I'm looking at the technician. Is that better? Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Paulin, I think we're going to do the same for you too. If you could talk, please, just to see if we could hear you. Okay. Okay, great, great. Now, third question, we're moving right along here. So, citizen engagement. So, volunteerism and citizen engagement seem to be on the decline over the last decade in New Brunswick. How can your organization, so the body that you are running for, how can it encourage community involvement for the common good and for the benefit of its citizens? René, you will start this time. Well, what's interesting to look at is that every 4 years, voters will vote for the mayor, for councillors and their representatives. And it's important that between elections, once you've elected your mayor, your councillors and your representatives, between elections, citizens still have to be able to speak out on specific projects. And citizen participation is something that is evolving. It is emerging in the municipality. In Dieppe, we have a participatory budget. And from what I've heard on this participatory budget, citizens appreciate being able to make decisions on certain projects. But I think we should do a lot more. I think we should go a lot further. As a democracy, citizen participation will allow us to raise the satisfaction level of citizens, to add value to all of the projects we're putting forth as a city. And I think we could go even further through public consultations, through different advisory committees where citizens could come and sit and work on specific projects. What I'm trying to say is that in this new form of democracy, this new way of doing politics, we have to leave greater room for the citizens, and councillors shouldn't be afraid of giving up a little bit of their power, if you will, to allow the projects to go forward for the city. Thank you. Okay, Corinne, your turn. Well, for me, the emphasis would be on volunteer work. One of the items in my little handout that you're going to see in the mail this week, for me, volunteerism is really important for a strong and resilient community. Volunteer work is very personal, but it gives a sense of belonging, a sense of well-being, and also allows people to counter their isolation. What we're going through now makes a lot of people feel very isolated. So for me, volunteering is an important way to allow people to come out of their isolation, to encourage them in their well-being and in countering the isolation. The city is already doing great work in its encouraging of volunteer work. We recognize our volunteers. I myself have been recognized in the past, and I'm grateful for that. But as an institution, the city could go further and could include in its vision and its mission and its values, it could include the principles of volunteer work. It could be one of the measures of success, and that would serve to encourage a greater number of volunteers. Perhaps it could set up a strategic plan that would give more importance to volunteer work. And I think that would be one way we could go a little further. We've already done a great job, but as part of our recovery from COVID, I think we could do even more. Thank you, Madame Godbout. Paulin. And if you want to wrap up on this question. Yeah, well, in terms of volunteer work, I have to tell you, I've done volunteer work in the different schools and here in different organizations in Dieppe, but we have to promote it. We have to do more promotion. we don't seem to do as much promotion. We don't stress enough the importance of volunteer work, the benefits of it, and to show the good side of volunteer work. Because when you show the good side of volunteer work, people will want to participate. Now, participatory democracy will incite people to do volunteer work. By that, I mean that as a city, we have to realize that we have to invest the more time in community work. Today, citizens see that councillors work on different issues and they have it on the corner of their desk until they work on it. There are other ways to doing things. For example, in the schools, we could encourage teachers to talk about volunteer work, and we could bring people or the youth from the school to, or we could bring volunteers to the schools. It'll help them, encourage them. It will be something that'll remain in their mind if they're shown it early. But we already do a lot in Dieppe, but we could always do more. And I think very quickly, as citizens and the councillors and the mayor should also participate. We should lead by example. We should go into schools. We should go into meeting spaces to promote volunteer work. And that will allow people to understand the need to invest themselves. Thank you. That was great. Okay, now let's talk about economic development. So because of the importance of economic development for the delivery of municipal, education, and health services, does your organization have a role to play in economic development? And if so, what is it? What will be your contribution to this economic development issue? Corinne, if you'd like to start. Thank you for that question. And for those of you at home, I've been working in economic development for over 15 years. I've been a lawyer for the federal government and responsible for economic development and regional and local issues. And so I recognize that if it is of local, provincial, and federal jurisdiction, but it's through cooperation that we'll be able to move forward. As a city, we have to play our part in economic development. We already have Expansion Dieppe that exists, and I really support the work that Expansion Dieppe is doing. We have to encourage businesses to set up shop in Dieppe. We have to create a favorable environment for them, and this council can work directly in that. And we have to try and see if we can set up cooperation with other jurisdictions. And if our objectives are not reflected at the provincial and federal level, well, we have to become the spokespersons to make sure that business persons do get what they need from the other levels of government. So I think that twinning between the different levels of government is important. And for me, of course, economic development is a very important issue. Thank you. Paulin? Yes, in terms of economic development, the elected governments want to make sure they have an economy that works well. And as a city that is growing fast, we have to be able to have this value added in the city. And working with Riverview, as we're already doing it with Moncton as well, we can work together in order to develop the region. But there is one thing that I often come back to this, and this is the ecology. And strategically speaking, through ecology and the environment, we can create thousands of jobs in order to have even more economic development. And this is something that we have to really work on hard over the next few years. Even in the city, we see that there are certain businesses that are doing a great job, but economic development cannot happen without being invested, without the population being invested. By that, I mean that we have to develop our city by taking our citizens into consideration. We cannot do the opposite. For all of the years that I've been living here, we have had some economic development, and some of them are great projects, but they've all happened without the citizens being able to speak out. So I think we should have referendums. People and citizens, residents here pay their property taxes. They want to have their word to say, and that will create what we call a direct democracy, and that will help the economic development. We have talent, we have intelligent men and women who can contribute even more and drive economic development. That's what I would like to contribute. Thank you. And René, to wrap up on this question. Thank you. Well, I think that the municipality has a role to play in the support of entrepreneurship in order to create and to maintain jobs while respecting its financial obligations, its financial means and obligations. For example, as Madame Godbout mentioned, there's Expansion Dieppe, which it works wonderfully well. Now, it offers free services to people who want to open a business here in Dieppe. But what we're lacking here is the financial arm, with the capital, with investment funds that could support the startup of businesses on the Dieppe territory. Or with this financial arm, we could offer financial incentives that would allow Dieppe to have financial levers for economic development. This would also help the creation of different activities by prioritizing the objectives of the city and to bringing to light the projects. For example, we could develop in the job sector in different activities that have a strategic importance for the city. For example, tourism or commerce, or by highlighting its resources and its attractions. We already have a great organization that's called Expansion Dieppe, but perhaps we should give it a financial lever as well. Thank you to all three of you. So now that concludes the first four questions. Now we're coming into our themed questions. In other words, there will be four different questions. For each dialogue, we're going to ask a different question. Whoops, I'm sorry. My first question then will be on inclusion. So this is something that is very close to us, especially us at Dialogue New-Brunswick. So here is your question, which will be the third question on my list. In your opinion, what actions should your organization take concretely to counter racism and to encourage learning opportunities on decolonization? Paulin. Well, first of all, I've been living in Dieppe for 12 years, quite some time already, and I've seen Dieppe grow. A lot of people's mentalities have changed. When we talked about racism and the whole issue of human rights, we've really progressed, but there's still a lot to do. We have to inform people, we have to educate them. People have to know. For example, a very concrete example. When you look at Google has succeeded because everybody is together. Everybody comes together. People work together for Google. And that is what is going to mean the success of a region or a region. And I think that we have to inform people. We have to live together. In other words, Dieppe was not just built by a couple of people. Dieppe has been and will be built by people from everywhere. It's a colossal job, but today we see that there is openness towards immigration. There was a position opened as somebody who is responsible just for immigration at Dieppe, but it'll take time. We are a young community. If we look towards Quebec or to the States, it took time. And so we're still very young here, but there are a lot of things that we have to work on in order to have that mix, that inclusion. And I think we can. I think we can do it. We've shown over time that as a city, we're able to build, to grow, and to include everybody, but we have to continue working on it. We have to continue to support the work that's already been started, and it starts with the citizen. Thank you. René, it's your turn. Well, that is a really good question, and it's a very broad question because there's not only one solution to counter racism. As I was president of the immigration committee that helps Francophone immigrants set up here in New Brunswick, the CAFI, and this is an issue that would come up regularly with the newcomers who were of a certain ethnic background. And Mr. Blaise pointed out that it has to go through education. Education of the population. I mentioned earlier, we talked about consultation and participatory democracy. In Dieppe, we have decisions that will involve everybody, but we have to do some concrete actions. We could charter a charter of rights. It's also the organization of the festival in order to help the community discover new countries, new horizons, and the organization after of sports events. For example, sports brings everybody together. Everything goes through education and the education of our youth, because we need a more social mix and economic mix in Dieppe.
Merci beaucoup, René. Corinne, le mot de conclusion sur cette question.
Thank you very much, René. Now, Corinne, the last word on this. As people said before me, I understand there's not one solution, and we need various approaches to fight racism. And I also understand and agree with the issues that were raised. As for me, I would say, I see through dialogue, through multicultural activities, I see a solution. And I find that it's a question of respect. When I think about running a council, I think about community living, how we support each other as residents. And in community living, our city could organize more leisure activities, to opportunities to exchange, to come together. It would be great, allowing us to get to know each other, to become comfortable with each other, and have an environment that's propitious to move forward. So that's how I see it. I have nothing else to add, but I'll take this time to invite people today, the residents of Dieppe, to take an opportunity to become familiar with our strategy of Dieppe Immigration 2020 to 2024. And it's through the partnership that we have in terms of immigration. 30 seconds. All right, so it's through cooperation that we have the best ideas. So Dieppe has already worked on this, and through this, we see there's a real way and a real will, rather, to fight racism. So as a city, we have to continue with this work. All right, thank you very much, Corinne. I like it when we hear dialogue. You've all said it a few times tonight, so it's great. It's very good. Yannick? All right, we'll go to question number 6, linked to community health. So for the 6th question, we'll talk about COVID-19. So what role should each group play when it comes to vaccination? So what role should each jurisdiction play in immunization towards COVID-19? René, well, in terms of the municipality must inform its citizens when it comes to COVID-19. It's something that happened. It's exceptional. It hadn't happened in a century. Each resident faces up to it. And as a municipality, I think Dieppe should develop a form of communication because it's the government that's the closest to its resident information sessions to communicate, and activities allowing indeed to answer some questions that people may have when it comes to COVID, because it was troubling, this pandemic. And I think the municipality has a role to play as its liaisons, work with the provincial government to share information and share all residents on best practices to fight COVID, to get out of this pandemic as quickly as possible. So communication is key, dialogue is key to be able to inform people as much as possible. All right, thank you, René. And now, Corinne, the floor is yours. Thank you. Health is a provincial jurisdiction. Even sometimes funding comes from other sources. I think it's appropriate to say, to align all the municipalities' efforts to align with the provincial efforts, allowing them to guide us in emergency measures. The municipality's role, to me, is to inform our citizens that they have the latest news and to support our residents when it comes to the necessary emergency measures and come to help them so that we can understand the challenges that we may have with COVID in our lives and to get through this. And this will touch on various topics we've tackled tonight, like volunteer work, dialogue, interactions, and social media, etc. And I think we can help people. And something else we can do, we have to think about mental health, encourage people to identify measures and infrastructures in the municipality that are available, like trails, to use them. So help people how to go through this situation. And it's important to be aware of those facilities. Thank you, Corinne and Paulin. You have the last word. I talked about jurisdiction, and I'm talking about federal jurisdiction. No, it's provincial, right? Health is a provincial jurisdiction. You're right. So sorry for that. But I wanted to say something. Through COVID, I have 3 children. I would like to have seen the city in which I live, where I pay my taxes for 12 years here, to keep us informed as to what was happening. There was like a breach. We had to wait to get information. It was a new illness. This pandemic hit everyone, but there was no information. I don't know why, but in the future, we have to work on communication, because many citizens with whom I spoke, they expected the city to inform us, to communicate with us. There wasn't much communication. I can understand. It was new. It was something that happened and that is troublesome. The more the city will inform us, the more it will reassure residents. Well, that's fine. Information comes from Fredericton, from the conservative government. But if we can also reinforce that message through our communities, I think it would have been appreciated. And maybe the city could have gone further and even give 1 mask to each resident. And we didn't get that. We were there. Sometimes we didn't have masks in shopping centers at first. So there was panic. So it's something everyone today has adjusted to this pandemic. And I truly believe that next few years will allow our cities to adjust through communication, through information, through dialogue. That's how we'll succeed, right? To struggle against this illness. Thank you very much. Paulin. All right. So now we'll focus on I'll go with the following question. young people in our region, like Yannick, who was the author of this question, are concerned about trash that can be found, especially in our trails, our forest, and yards close to their school. What role can your organization play to deal with this important environmental issue? Corinne, Mrs. Godbout, the floor is yours. Well, thank you. This is also a more youthful theme. We've been very serious tonight. Well, and youth can participate in the solution. So, of course, our trash are everywhere. There's trash everywhere around the world. We see this in the environment. We see this with plastic masks, that we see right now. While we go through COVID-19, we see masks everywhere. So, of course, solutions for me come through partnerships, not just with the city. We can do things in partnership with others, people who've studied this issue beforehand. But if we simply look at this, I want to say the solutions can be found through partnerships. If we want to look at the municipality, if I want to go back with an idea to improve the situation, I really like that we could have pilot projects like, zero trash. As we've seen in other municipalities, we encourage families to work and live and produce zero trash. So we take families, support them so that they can live differently and reach such a goal. That could be an example. And we could take a family with young people more open to this idea, and they could promote this idea. There's lots of ideas. It's through partnerships and looking at what other people are doing to be open to all these possibilities so that we leave a better world for our children. For me, one of the reasons I'm running here at council is because I want a city where my children will want to live. They'll certainly want to live in a city where there's less trash. All right, Paulin? It's a subject that's dear to me. I've written a great deal with L'Étoile. I do volunteer work with L'Étoile, but we need political will. It's fine to make speeches when it comes to the environment. When I see our young people on our streets telling us our planet is dying, what are we doing? So the population gives power to the mayor, to councillors, and that power must be exercised that is beneficial to the population. I think it starts through city councils. There's no point in, thinking if a city council thinks environmentally, things can change. It starts at the basis, and we have to create this dynamic, this energy through councillors. If councillors encourage all the residents and their neighbors to do like him, to be environmentally conscious, our problem is that we want a lot of things around it, but we can start with smaller things to deal with what we're doing, encourage people in the city, encourage citizens to participate in environmental initiatives, which would be great for humanity. And I think it will snowball and it could create a lot of things and encourage people to start thinking about this. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing, we must inform people. I know it may seem some people are not as well informed. Many people think, I think that's my opinion, some people rather think that the environmental is a problem, but no, it's great for our society. It's great for our humanity because we have a lot of things to do and everyone can work on this to succeed and play an important role for our city. Thank you very much. Once again, this question is vast in sustainable development. Yes, I think today there's a certain awareness now when it comes to the planet. Our planet indeed is in danger. And I think for this specific question, once again, I think through, just like racism, it'll go through education. We can see there's different mentalities between generations. I can see it with my children already. when it comes to the environment. As soon as I put something in the wrong recycling bin, my kids let me know. So I see their mentalities are changing to continue as a city. Yes, as a city, as councillors, we have a role to play to inform, to do some prevention and educate citizens and young people, to encourage everyone to keep the city beautiful and clean. We can have volunteer work and zero trash initiatives that could, help. But I think, in fact, there's things that need to be put in place through education, educate new generations. They're already educated and better educated than past generations. And again, the trails are treasures for Dieppe. So seeing trash, no, we need more trash cans. So the city has its power, it's limited. The city can't do everything. Dialogue, education, implementing initiatives to bring about awareness on how beautiful this city is. We have beautiful green spaces. I think that's the first step to move toward, I'd say, positive. All right. Thank you, all three. It's true, these questions are very broad, right? I think you're answering those questions very well. You're doing very well. Yannick, this is our last thematic question. Yes, our eighth question linked to governance. The theme of the year 2021 was a failure in information according to the Edelman Trust Barometer. As elected officials, how do you think your organization should address this phenomenon created by the gap between the informed public and the mass public? Paulin, in terms of governance, we see a period that's very difficult because there's a lot of things happening on social media. That's a reality. And there's a lot of information. A lot of people will listen to what's happening on social media instead of elected members. And, it's already starting to look like misinformation. But there's one thing that remains, how to find this balance between citizen and policies. That's not new. A lot of citizens find that politicians, once they're elected, they abandon the electorate. I think we have to bring back this relationship between the electorate and politicians. I think it's really easy. We always go back to this. We have to have participatory democracy, because if there's a project in Dieppe that takes place, let's say $1 million project in Dieppe, and they do it, and the city asks its citizens to say yes or no, it creates a strong links allowing the city to be able to say, yes, you have the power. You elected us. We're your employees. We can do the work with you. People will feel involved, informed, and have closer ties to their elected members and their city. We hear a lot about plots and from here and there. So we have to work on the basis. The role of the city is just this, to renew this relationship that's so important. And I would add in closing, democracy is great. We elect people every participatory democracy focuses on the citizen at the very heart of the city, realizing that indeed the citizen can think and speak his or her mind. As long as we don't have this, you'll see there'll be a greater gap. People, they no longer want to have anything to do with policy or politics. They're discouraged, Yes, it's a broad question. Yeah. Yes. All right. It's your question. Now the floor. Could you repeat the question? Absolutely. The theme for the year 2021 was declared as a failure of information according to the Edelman Trust Barometer National Report. As elected officials, how do you think your organization should address this phenomenon created by the gap between the informed public and the mass public, or the general public? Something that's important when we get involved in politics, it's good governance. So for me, the city of Dieppe must have clear rules when it comes to our work, because there's a lot of fake news. As my friend Paulin just said, there's a lot of fake news and disinformation. So there's a lack of transparency. We see this. I've knocked on 1,300 doors going to door. And indeed, yes, I've heard that, there's a resident that tells me, René, Dieppe is like a donut. We're like the hole in the donut. No one cares about us. And the information is always, and decisions are always taken behind closed doors. And it's true. This quote shocked me because in my life, and personally speak, in my life, I believe in democracy. I come from a republic, a democracy, defending these values. And transparency to me when in politics is important. But in Dieppe, Dieppe must determine and focus on public debates instead of working in camera. And also, of course, there's some information that must be kept confidential, but the trust between people and councillors would be renewed if we could broaden the deliberations, and we have to do the fewest possible things in camera. In Ontario, it's forbidden in law to do things behind closed door. Why in Ontario, not in Brunswick or not in Dieppe? That's my question. I know I moved away from the subject, but there you go. But you find this subject very fascinating. That's what I see. Corinne, I'm sorry, that's your question. Oh, sorry. Thank you. When it comes to this question, linked to governance, to me, transparency is key. It's one of my 3 pillars in my brochure. Transparency is part of this. So for me, we have to focus on transparency through decisions. Transparency is the point of departure when we share information in Dieppe. I think this will allow to bring greater trust. People will trust in our decisions. We have to recognize, of course, that in some situations, and it's even under law, that we have to make some decisions in camera when it comes to collective agreement, land purchases. But as councillors, we have to be able to communicate to the population why we were working in camera behind closed doors. We have to come towards people, talk to people, and have these difficult conversations. Sometimes we avoid these because they're difficult, but it just widens the gap. So because it's difficult, we should take the time and really explain fully and tell our residents the reason why we make this decision or that decision, be aware of it and trust in our decisions. We have to come before the public more often through social media, and maybe in a more interesting way, we have to go where they are, where the people are, to have this discussion. And also, of course, when we want to be transparent, public transportation is key. We have to be able to continue with a participatory budget, consult people, and give them a notice when things are coming up that may impact their lives. Maybe focus on that. And certainly transparency is the issue that will bring us to better solutions. All right, thank you. Thank you to all 3. Sorry, Yannick, I took over. You're stealing my questions. Yeah, no, I'm the worst one. I can't do 3 things at once. I just can't. Anyways, so we're coming to the end, but really I thank you, all of you, for your answers tonight. This was very interesting. Congratulations, not only for the time that you've invested in preparing for this. We could feel that you're well prepared, but also for being here tonight. It's really, really greatly appreciated. Now we grant you the last word, allowing you to give some information to the public that have yet to be heard. So you have 2 minutes, 30 seconds. So we have the timer here. We'll start with whom before? Who did we start with? Do you recall? With Corinne. We started Corinne. All right. So René, we'll start with you.
C'est vrai que Moi, une première
Well,
chose en 2 minutes 30 que je voulais souligner.
One thing I'd like to point out is that I'm delighted to see the high level of candidates running for municipal office. I'm really delighted to see that the ideas that I have, that I've put in my handout, are shared by a great number of people in terms of governance, of transparency, of affordable housing. So whatever choice the citizens make this year, there are quality candidates that will be able to transmit their vision for the city of Dieppe. Now, for myself, I would be really delighted to be elected in Ward 4 as a councillor, but the city of Dieppe needs to make a shift in its ideology. It needs to shift and look at what the citizens want. It has to ask itself, what do the citizens want for tomorrow? So a number of candidates think that the city of Dieppe will be well served by the candidates who are running here. Thank you. Paulin? Yes, well, we're coming to the end of this meeting. The City Hall of Dieppe is where all decisions are made on our beautiful city. For the last 12 years, citizens have told me that they consider the City Hall like a kingdom. It's a gang of old friends who are voted in, but the population does not feel listened to or consulted, or their opinion is not taken into consideration. The citizens want to see new faces and new blood in City Hall. I heard you cry, and that's why I am running as a candidate in order to represent you. I believe in your sincerity, in your intellectual and physical capability, in what you can contribute towards the success of our city. I know it. If I'm elected, I will be working for you, and you will be my employer. In other words, I will be listening to you. The relationship between yourself and me will be that of an employer-employee relationship. I would like to install participatory democracy in my ward, in my city. You will be consulted, you will be listened to, your words will count. I will bring to the city all of the positive ideas that work towards the community. Your ideas will be defended by your councillor. All expenses over $1 million will be voted by a referendum. In other words, we as a ward, Ward 2, if we agree or we don't, we can vote online in a secure way. But it's your money, you pay your taxes, so you have to vote on it. And you will also be able to vote on the expansion of Dieppe. We need a solid environmental plan, and your ideas are welcome. They will be defended by your councillor if I am elected. Thank you, Paulin. Corinne, thank you. Just a few points I'd like people to keep in mind. First of all, I am a professional, and in my role as a professional lawyer, I do have a code of ethics. I have a code of behavior as a federal civil servant as well. And I also have experience here in the community. So I hope you trust that I will be a good counselor, that I will be reliable and responsible in my role. I have the support of my family. As a candidate, I'd like to thank them for that. You'll see in my handout that families are very important to me, and my candidacy was a family project. The children spent their whole March break on their mom's campaign. And my son did the infographics for my posters. My other children prepared my COVID plan. We all participated in the discussions on what we wanted to see in our city. So I think it's not only what I believe for families, but I'm experiencing it, I live it, and I have their support. Knowing that they might lose some of their mom's time, but they are ready to support me in my wish to be elected as a councillor. I want to give back to my community, and I want to make sure that the city of Dieppe continues to be a city where it's great to grow up, great to raise children and hopefully grandchildren one day. And I am very grateful for the former councillors. We're in the council chambers here. Certain councillors are not running again, and I'd like to thank them for having left us a council, a city that has a lot to offer, and we have the opportunity to work with something that's already well structured and strong. I'd like to thank staff at the city. They will be important partners, and I'd like to thank citizens who are going to go vote on May 10th, and hopefully for me as councillor at large. Thank you. So on behalf of the great team, I'd like to thank each and every one of you, the candidates, for having taken the time with us this evening. We know how demanding it is to manage an election campaign, so we really appreciate your time, and you did a great job. I would also like to acknowledge our partner, the City of Dieppe, for allowing us to use their premises and their facilities this evening and to broadcast our dialogues on their YouTube channel. I'd also like to remind you all, and I'd like to remind the interpreters as well, and just to remind you that the dialogues are recorded and therefore will be available on the city's YouTube platform, on the Dialogue New Brunswick Facebook page, and Rogers TV channel. And finally, we'd like to thank the interpreters for their great work this evening, and to all those who listen to us either on YouTube or on Dialogue NB's Facebook page. Thank you and have a great evening.